Hey everybody, this is Brian here from Co-op Critics, and I am here today to give you a quick look at the Order 1886, the new PS4 exclusive that has been basically all over Twitch and all over every gaming site in creation this week. I was going to do a Let's Play, but there are so many Let's Plays out of there that I figured I'd just do a quick look for people who want to sort of cut through the chatter and just see if this is a game that they want to play. So, as you have probably heard, the Order is a third-person shooter that is very much akin to your Gears of War or other cover-based shooters. The basic mechanics of the action are exactly what you see here. You're ducking behind cover, you're popping out, you have a primary weapon, a secondary weapon, you have grenades, and you pick up ammo along the way. It feels very much like a Gears of War type game in terms of the moment-to-moment action. But this game is not as much of an action game as Gears of War for sure. They're telling you a story here. Ready at Dawn, the developer, is creating kind of a curated experience that is much more interactive story than it is third-person shooter game. So I think your mileage may vary depending on what you're looking for. I mean, as you can see, we just had an action scene where we were hunting down what they refer to as bedlamites, but they were sort of like escaped inmates or escaped asylum patients. And after we took them out, you get a long cutscene where you're introduced to other members of your team. You're basically an order of knights that are like the Knights of the Round Table. And this is an alternate version London that takes place in 1886, where there has been a struggle for years against what they call half-breeds, which are basically werewolves, lycans they also call them. And you, as a member of this order, are sort of tasked with maintaining the balance between humanity and these creatures. And so you're sort of a special forces type of unit that are much higher in stature than the police. And so when you get brought into a situation, it's because there's this paranormal element to it. And as we start, you're sort of dealing with these escaped asylees, but then you'll see in a few minutes that we're going to go and encounter one of the lycans. But if you don't like cutscenes, then you're going to have a real problem with this game, because there is a lot of stop-start to the action where you are going through, you know, a shootout for a few minutes, and then you'll get a brief cutscene. There are a lot of not necessarily QuickTime events, but the contextual button pressing. So when you have to open doors or you have to, move something out of the way, there's a lot of that stuff that sort of breaks up you walking through this version of London. And it's a very linear game because they're trying to tell you a story and they're telling it in a very specific way. So the game itself is gorgeous. I mean, as you can see from the graphics, in the character design, everything looks really great, although it is kind of a dull color because it is this sort of steampunky version of London. So there's a lot of dark. The game is not a super bright game even in the daytime, as you can see. But that's not really what you're here for if you're playing the Order. So you're playing the Order because you're interested in the story and you want to fight the monsters that go bump in the night. And so as we get into this part of the game here, you're sort of splitting up with different party members and you're going through this area looking for one of these, you're looking for more of the escaped inmates, but what you're going to find is one of the lycans. And you'll see in a moment, as we get into this encounter, essentially what these types of encounters are like, because they're a mix of the third-person shooter action and the contextual button presses. And so it's kind of like a mini boss fight when we get into fighting these guys, and you'll see that in a minute. But there's a lot of walking down very linear corridors. You'll notice when you get into an area where you're going to be getting into some gunplay that you'll see right away, oh, these are the areas I'm supposed to get behind. This is where I'm supposed to take cover. It's pretty well telegraphed as you get into any area, and there's not a lot of room for exploration. You'll notice as I'm going through, I'm not checking in trash cans. I'm not searching for things. There's no sort of Batman sense or anything where there's a lot of collectibles in the environment. There's not really any of that stuff. There are things that you pick up that are tied into the story and you can examine them, and the way that you do that is sort of turning them over and look at the front and the back of it. But there's not a lot of things to pick up or things to interact with in the environment. It is sort of go from point A to point B, take in the scenery, and then engage in whatever action this particular scene calls for. So it's very scripted, very linear, not a lot of exploration, but that's not to say I don't enjoy it. I've spent a few hours with it so far, and I like the story that they're telling, and they do a very nice job of set dressing and setting up these encounters. It's just, I'm actually playing Dying Light at the same time right now, which is just super wide open, and so it's quite a shift of gears to deal with a game that is so linear. As you can see here, I'm shimmying across a ledge. There is some minor platforming, but it's definitely not on the level of a Dying Light or Assassin's Creed or any of that stuff. It's really just another way for you to get to point A to point B. And when you have to platform, it will be pretty much the only thing that you can do in that area. They're asking for you to go through the environment that way. So there's times where you have a rooftop chase scene where you're sort of platforming in some areas, jumping across rooftops and things like that. But it's really just to lead you to whatever the next encounter is. And here, I believe, is where we're going to see, yep, this is the encounter with the lichen, and you can see the transformation happening right here, and there's actually more than one of them. And so what I did not realize right away is that you're supposed to dodge here. When they come at you, you can continue to fire, but there's a contextual button press where you dodge out of the way, and you'll see that in a minute. So I'm just going to kind of let that play out, and you can see what I'm talking about. You'll see right there, I was supposed to hit X and I did not do a good job of it, so I got hit. And you can't really take too many of those, although your health does regenerate. So the goal is to get them coming at you, to dive out of the way, and then to shoot them. But it is a bit disorienting because your camera really doesn't swing around that fast, and the game itself is not, you know, super quick in terms of how your character moves. So it's kind of difficult to get a beat on them after you roll out of the way. So your best bet is actually to shoot these guys as they're coming at you to sort of weaken them, and then try to swing around quickly enough after you dodge out of the way to take them down as they're running back away. But pretty much what they do is they come at you, they loop back around out of sight, and then they try to charge at you again. So you do get a bit of a breather in between, except when you're dealing with multiple enemies. So you really got to keep an eye on, you know, who's where and where they're coming from. And I tried to kind of get myself into a corner to make sure I could see them. When they're almost dead, there is a finishing move that you go up and do on them and then take them down. And here's where I didn't realize how many enemies I was dealing with and almost got myself taken out. So, but I think I managed to take these guys down without completely dying, if I'm not mistaken. So again, I think I had a machine gun. Right there you can see as they're sort of charging you and trying to bite your face, you're slamming on the X button. And so it does have that kind of quick time event piece to these major encounters. That is not how the moment-to-moment combat is when you're dealing with the third-person shooting. You don't have to worry about that. But when you're dealing with these guys, it adds sort of another layer to it, that you're dealing with the quick time stuff too. And it can get a bit frustrating when you keep getting knocked down and you don't get up quick enough to see where they're going. But I think that I managed to get all of them, and I think one of them escapes here. And again, you do the finishing move where you go up and take him out right at the end there in a pretty brutal fashion. Yep, and then this guy gets away, and then the chase is on. Now, I'm not going to show you this entire chase here, because you're going to see me meet up with my partners and then talk about how one of them made it to the surface, and then he's going to climb out, and I think it ends with me just showing you the sort of arc reactor thing. But this is really what the moment-to-moment gameplay of The Order is like. So little contextual button presses, definitely lots of cutscenes that are interspersed throughout the story. But if you like third-person shooters and you like a good story being told to you, then I think you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this game. So that's going to wrap up my quick look. Check out coopcritics.com for more on The Order in the coming weeks.
Oh! Oh my gosh! That was unbelievable.